Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Knee Knits. My name is Amy and I talk about all things knitting, and today is podcast episode number 46, where I'll be sharing what I've been knitting and working on for the past few weeks. It has definitely been a while since I posted my last podcast, a long gap that I actually didn't really anticipate. I think my last podcast with project updates and the formal style of what I've been working on has been about 4 full weeks. October was a crazy month for my job, my full-time job. I had 2 separate work trips, and then I squeezed going to Rhinebeck in between those 2 work trips. So it's definitely been hectic, and reflecting on what I worked on this past month for notes for today, it's actually not a lot, so I'm not anticipating this episode to be too lengthy, but I do have lots of details to share on a few different projects, and I actually have some new yarn to share, which will be exciting at the end of today's video. I am wearing today a hand knit. This is my Kutar wrap cardigan, which is a pattern by Sari Nordland. I knit this out of Knitting for Olive Merino and Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair, both in the color putty. This is a wrap cardigan, and it kind of has a cool construction with the ties, the I-cord ties that sort of cross over like that, and it does feature this really beautiful lace pattern here. I do like wearing a dark colored t-shirt underneath just because I feel like it makes the lace pattern pop a bit more, and it's definitely sweater weather here in Massachusetts. It's been really nice to start wearing a lot of my hand knits, especially the ones that I finished towards the end of the winter or maybe even in the spring last year, and then they kind of went straight into storage, and now I finally get to wear them repeatedly, which is really fun. So that's what I'm wearing today. And before we get into the bulk of the projects, let me take a few moments to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is a platform where you can build your online presence from the ground up. With a Squarespace website, you have lots of options for features like selling courses or digital and physical products. You can also post blog articles, which is what I do on my website, ne-knits.com. Squarespace's design intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful, more personalized website tailored to their unique business needs. With the Squarespace site, you can easily integrate your social media pages, such as your Instagram and YouTube, directly to your website with just a few clicks. If you're interested in creating your own Squarespace site, head to squarespace.com to start a free trial today. Once you're ready to launch your website, head to squarespace.com/neknits and use the code neknits to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So thank you, Squarespace, for being a returning sponsor of Knee Knits. Feel free to check out my website, ne-knits.com, if you ever want to see some other forms of content. A lot of them do kind of mirror the videos that I post here, just in a different style. But yeah, that's always available. And I do want to announce the winner of the little giveaway that I did last podcast. Again, I didn't anticipate a 4-week break in between the 2 podcasts, so you all had plenty of time to enter. There were over 400 comments, so I did randomly select a winner for this blank space DK weight Surrey yarn from Sorella. It was from their Eras collection. This was gifted to me, and I used half of it to make my totally tubular turtle tank, and I figured I would pass along the other half to somebody else. So the winner is the username Likes Soil. Here is your comment. So congratulations. Feel free to send me an email. My email is right here, and let me know your shipping address, and I will get this out to you as soon as possible. I hope you enjoy the yarn. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that Sorella comes back with the Surrey DK base because it's just such a fun, fluffy yarn to knit with. Getting into the projects, first up we have 2 finished objects. My first finished object is my Musselburgh hat. The Musselburgh hat is a pattern by Isolde Teague. It is one of the most popular hat patterns if you go to Ravelry with the number of projects it has, and it's usually always in like the top charts today, stuff like that. So very popular pattern. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it, but just in case you aren't, or if you're new here, the Musselburgh is a swatchless pattern. So you cast on at the crown, you knit starting with a small circumference cast on, and you do crown increases, and then based on your gauge after you've knit the crown increases, you then follow the pattern, tells you exactly how many stitches to increase to depending on what size you're making. So you don't have to make a gauge swatch ahead of time. You can use pretty much any yarn ranging from light fingering weight to DK weight. I don't know if it works for worsted, but definitely a good range within fingering to DK. And it's double layered, so I'm gonna unfold it here, and you knit a really long stockinette tube, and then you do crown decreases at the other end, so you have this encapsulated knit piece that folds in on itself and then creates a beanie. I'm a big fan of the Musselburgh hat. I find that the shape of it, because it is all stockinette, at least the ones that I have knit, I just like this way the stockinette fabric lays on my head. It's like very smooth, very flat. I find some other beanies, I do love a lot of other beanie patterns, but things with ribbing sometimes don't really sit on my head the way I want them to, and Petite Knit's Oslo hat, I do love that pattern and I always recommend it as well, but it's got like the complicated folding of the brim and like there's a lot going on. If you've done the Oslo hat, you know. So I feel like there's just like a lot of fabric layers and then some folding and stuff that doesn't always sit as nicely on my head that I would like, or that I would prefer it to sit. So I find that the Musselburgh, because there's nothing to it, it's just clean stockinette fabric. It folds and then molds to your head really nicely after a couple wears. It does take a few moments to sort of fold it back on itself. I'm trying to get it all situated right now, but I have not been successful, so might as well show you guys what I'm doing here. So to fold up my Musselburgh, I usually kind of eyeball the middle of it, and I grab two outer pieces, and then I kind of like open it up so the top crown can fall in on itself like that. And then I sort of put my finger on the like decrease or the bind off, and then sort of hold it and shake it on my arm like this until my hands that's holding the other end gets to the crown here. So now my two crowns are aligned inside and outside, and then I sort of pinch it with the hand that's inside and then move the fabric around so it's all straightened out like that. It's not an exact science. It's obviously easier if you have it in your hand and can sort of feel where the fabric is falling. But once it's folded and then you wear it a few times, like I said, it really does kind of mold to your head shape, and I feel like it's really comfortable. It stretches out nicely. I knit mine to have a folded brim here, so I always like wearing my beanies with a folded brim like this. I ended up using the entire skein of yarn, and the skein of yarn that I use is from Ruby and Roses. It's their colorway Invisible String from their Taylor Swift collection. I use their soft rose base, which is an 85% superwash merino, 15% nylon, fingering weight yarn. I think there's 437 yards per 100 grams, and I use like the entire skein for this. Like, this is all I have left of the yarn skein, and I think when I measured the weight of the hat, it was like 99 grams. So the skein itself definitely was a little bit more than 100 grams based on this leftover, and I basically used the whole thing. So I knit my hat to the size adult medium. That's based on my head circumference, fit right on the size chart there. My gauge using 3.25 millimeter needles was 6.5 stitches per 1 inch. And I knit between the two crowns. So when I say between crowns, I meant measuring from the end of the increases at the first crown to the beginning of the decreases at the second crown. I had 18 inches in between. Used up pretty much all of the fingering weight yarn. So if you're curious about like for the proportions to get this style hat with the brim, those are my measurements, and I do keep those all on my Ravelry project page if you ever need to reference it in the future, since I know so many people knit their Musselburgh hats differently, and sometimes you see one person's and you're like, oh, I want that style. So if you want this style, those are my numbers there. Yeah, it fits great. I really love the yarn color. I really love this sort of like purpley gray base, and then it has all these pops of color like the aqua and the darker purple and the pink. It's just like a really nice, super multicolored hat. So when knitting it, it was really fun to see the fabric create like the patterning. And when I'm wearing it, I feel like from afar, I mean, obviously it's a variegated yarn, but it's not like in your face variegated. Like, it just kind of has a kind of natural, kind of muted tone. So I'm a big fan of it. Definitely love the Musselburgh pattern, definitely love the yarn, and definitely plan on casting on another Musselburgh soon. The other finished object I have to share today are my spooky Halloween socks. So these were finished right in time for Halloween, which was just this past week. So I was really excited to have these done. I did wear them on Halloween. So they've been cast off, blocked, and then I wore them on Halloween while we were passing out candy for trick-or-treaters. So I actually had to step outside a good handful of times with these, and they got a little like wet outside. So if you look closely, you might see they're not the cleanest. So just keep that in mind. I definitely will wash them after I finish showing them here. But these socks are just vanilla socks, and I use the self-striping yarn, which has been so fun. I really like the self-striping yarn because you get such a cool looking sock with very minimal effort. And the yarn that I used is from Hobie right here. So this was their Halloween sock wool, and this is in the color number 3, which I think is called Silly Socks. I think I accidentally thought it was called Spooky Socks in my previous podcast, but then when I was typing up my notes or the description for the YouTube video, I saw on the website it was Silly Socks, and I was like, oh, that's not as fun, but I continued to call these my Spooky Socks, as they have the very Halloween-y colors of orange, black, and purple. And then for the accent color, I had the perfect mini skein in my stash. This is from Honey and Quill, from actually their Christmas sock set last year in their fingering weight sock yarn, and I had actually gone with a different mini for my Christmas socks from that sock set. So I had this in stash, and it was just like the perfect Halloween green to add with the Halloween sock yarn. So really happy with how these turned out. I didn't follow a pattern specifically. I just kind of did it based on what I know in my sock fit. I have done the vanilla socks by the Crazy Sock Lady, so definitely recommend that pattern if you're looking for something similar. Or I think Summer Lee's I'm So Basic socks are also like a cuff down, stockinette, heel flap, and gusset sock pattern. And I just added a couple modifications on mine to give myself a shorter heel flap, as I've learned that that fits my foot better after doing my custom socks book by Kate Atherley sort of worksheet. So that's my new kind of like sock formula, is a shorter heel flap and gusset than what is normally recommended in the pattern. I did make sure that these stripes lined up quite perfectly, so when I got to the end of the first sock, you can see here I ended with the black, and then following the stripe sequence, the next color available was going to be this purple, but I did not start the sock with purple. I started with orange, so I basically just had to go through the yarn ball until I got to the next orange part of the yarn, and then I cast on my second sock, which led me to having 2 perfectly matching striped socks, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. The Hobie sock yarn is definitely not the softest. It's got a little bit of like a halo and a little bit of texture. It definitely feels pretty stiff, but I did not have any issues wearing it on my feet. I feel like compared to like a superwash merino from a lot of indie dyers, their bases are very like soft and kind of silky and smooth. The Hobie sock yarn is not like that at all, but I think it might lead to a more durable sock over time. And I used less than half of the skein for my pairs of socks. Like this is 100 grams, and I think I still have 50 grams here. So I can make another pair of Halloween socks next year. I could find someone else who wants to make matching socks with me, because I still have some of the green left over too. My first work in progress today is my Aurelia Pullover. Yes, we are still chugging along on this, but we're getting really close to finishing it. So I've kind of put a lot of focus on it. I feel like I'm trying to give myself the most time possible to work on it, you know, putting aside some other projects if I have dedicated quiet knitting time, because I do have some other complicated projects on the needles, but I'm choosing to focus on Aurelia so I can get this cast off. The Aurelia Pullover is a top-down raglan pullover by Sari Nordland. It features all over cables and baubles and is knit in a DK weight yarn. So the yarn that I'm using for mine is from Sorella. This is Sorella Yarn's Classic DK Base, which is a 100% superwash merino yarn. This is in the color Folklore, which is this really nice purpley gray color. I wish I remembered where I was on the last podcast. I cannot remember if I had cast off the sleeve in the last podcast or not. In case I didn't, and this is new to you, I did finish one sleeve, which is really fun. So I just finished up the cable pattern. You do the decreases on the sides of the double moss stitch on the underside of the arm. So I think right here is where the decreases ended for me, and then I added, I don't know what that looks like 3 inches of length before I decided it was long enough and I was ready for the cuff. The cuff is done in half twisted rib, which I really like. I think it's such a clean look with the whole sweater. It's also featured on the collar that's folded and then at the bottom of the sweater as well. So really nice to have this first sleeve wrapped up, and then I immediately hopped over to the other sleeve. Now that the sleeve cable pattern is in my head and I don't have it fully memorized, but I definitely remember the rhythm. I feel like picking up this project after like half a year of not working on it took a while for me to look at the charts and kind of figure out where I was in the pattern. So glad to sort of be back in the rhythm of knitting this. I am enjoying it. I feel like I talk about how this project has taken me a really long time, but that doesn't mean I have not been enjoying it. It is really nice to see this beautiful, like, it's truly art form off the needles with the yarn, and the cables are time consuming, but I really enjoy working them up. Working with this superwash merino yarn is really fun. It's really smooth on the needles. I feel like doing the cables, I don't really have any difficulty with the superwash merino. The only thing I don't love about using hand-dyed yarn with this sweater is the alternating skeins portion. It just adds a lot of complexity when there already is a lot of complexity, but I actually just finished my last sort of section of alternating skeins. I had kept some of the yarn that I used in the body of the raglan before splitting for sleeves, so that way I could alternate it in when starting the next sleeve. So like some of this yarn that I used here is also continuing into the sleeve, and then I just finished like alternating that out with a new ball. So all I have left to work with is this singular ball of yarn. So really glad that I can just knit away on this sleeve, not have to worry about alternating skeins, and then wrap up this project. It is recommended to be worn with 1 to 4 inches of positive ease, and by knitting the second size, if my gauge is matching Nordland's pattern gauge, then I should have about 4 inches of positive ease in this sweater on me around my full bust, which to me 4 inches is a great number. I have definitely learned over time where I like my sweaters to sit in terms of positive ease, and I find that anywhere between like 4 to 6 to 8 inches is usually a good spot for me. Again, depending on the style, it really does vary depending on the look I'm going for, but for something like this basic raglan that has some nice texture, I'm gonna wear it sort of as like an everyday sweater. I think 4 inches will be a really nice fit. The needle size called for in this pattern is 4 millimeters, and I'm using 4.5 millimeters to get gauge. I do remember that I did block this yoke before splitting for sleeves, just to make sure that my armhole depth was good before moving on to split for the sleeves. So you might be able to see, you might not be able to see, but you know, the yoke before splitting for sleeves has been blocked, where the rest of it hasn't been blocked. I remember after blocking it for that first time, I really liked how all of the cables opened up. I really liked how the yarn sort of smoothed out. So I'm definitely really excited for the whole blocking process of this sweater as well. I can tell it's really going to transform. It's really going to open up, and I'm just so excited to wear it this winter. So maybe next time I film Aurelia will be done. I'm not sure, but definitely would be exciting if it was. And I did say that I'm trying to focus on that one instead of some of my other projects. Like you guys might recall, you haven't seen my Ingrid sweater in a while. I have not touched that in a very long time. I think it's because I'm trying to focus on Aurelia, and I also just got to the point in the Ingrid where I had to pick up the sleeves, and picking up stitches, it's just such a roadblock for me. I can't get past it unless I really force myself to sit down and pick up the stitches. So haven't really touched Ingrid in a while, but I have been working a lot on my Amy sweater, which is my next work in progress to share. Here is my Amy sweater. And current progress is that I have one sleeve done, the body is done, the neckline is done, and I'm almost done with the second sleeve. So I'm really excited that this is definitely going to be a finished object soon. If there's 2 projects I've been working on the most, it's been my Amy sweater and the Aurelia. So lots of stockinette knitting on this. This is a pattern by Petite Knit. It is a top-down raglan sweater knit in a DK weight yarn at a DK weight gauge. The yarn that is suggested is Sanisgarn Pure Gint, and that's the yarn that I'm using for my project. I had a sweater quantity worth of Pure Gint in this really nice color called Cocoa Nibs, which is from the Petite Knit color card collection. And Pure Gint is a 100% Norwegian wool yarn. It is a DK weight yarn, but it definitely is a heavier DK weight leaning worsted yarn. There are 91 meters in 50 grams, so if you're familiar with other DK weight yarns, usually the yardage is a little bit, or the meterage is a little bit longer than that, so this sort of tells you that it's a little bit thicker and definitely makes a more dense fabric when knit up. I am knitting the size extra small for myself in this pattern. The suggested amount of ease is about 8 to 9 inches. To me, 8 to 9 inches is pushing it to be a little bit too oversized for my liking, so I opted to size down from my suggested size, so I'm knitting size extra small, which as long as I'm meeting gauge should give me about 7 inches of positive ease. It is a top-down raglan, and you do have a lot of flexibility, I guess, of where you could stop the raglan increases. I did do it to pattern, and now that I'm on the sleeves, I don't think I realized how big these sleeves are. You do raglan sleeve increases a lot, so you have a pretty wide sleeve to begin with, and then you don't do a whole lot of decreasing out by the time you get to the end of the sleeve. So this here is the sleeve width for the size extra small, which you can see compared to my wrist is quite large. This is giving me, or it's reminding me of my October sweater, which is another pattern by Petite Knit that also has very large sleeves, and these can actually be knit on a 16-inch circular needle the entire time. So definitely something I wasn't really expecting with this pattern. I feel like based on the pattern photos, I couldn't really tell that the sleeve was so wide, but now that I know and looking back at the photos, I can kind of see how it has that wider fit on Petite Knit. So that's something if I were to make a note of in the future. I don't think I would have chosen to have a sleeve be this wide. I think a lot about like finished bust circumference. I have also talked about with sleeve length and body length on me, but I really have ignored sleeve circumference in terms of figuring out what I like the best. And this is one of those things where if I had known ahead of time, I probably would have stopped the raglan a little bit earlier to make the sleeve a little bit not as wide, and then or I could have done more decreases evenly spaced to end up with a narrower sleeve at the end of the cuff. So that's something that in hindsight maybe I would have changed, but I don't think I'm going to dislike this sleeve. It's just I wasn't really expecting it. I'm knitting my Amy sweater with 4.5 millimeters to meet gauge. The gauge of this pattern is 20 stitches per 4 inches or 10 centimeters, and I really enjoyed knitting at that gauge with that needle size with the Pure Gint. It's really a nice knitting experience. The stitches are really smooth. I feel like knitting with the Pure Gint, the combination of my stainless steel Chaogu needles, I just really like the combo, so it's been something that I've been excited to pick up and to work on. And I just also really love the stitch definition. I mean, you can see the sweater has so many cool details that I think really shine in the Pure Gint. For example, the neckline is picked up and then you do a purl round to create a little bit of definition at the bottom of the neckline. You have the rolled edges here at the end of the 2x2 ribbing, and then of course the 2x2 ribbing I think just looks so crisp with this yarn, and I'm really excited to be using this color as well. Something I haven't knit with before. It's not like the basic black, it's just a little bit more of a, I don't know, I feel like it's very autumnal because it's brown. It is a color that's in my personalized color palette, so really excited with the potential for this sweater and styling it with a bunch of different outfits. My next project is a new project to the podcast. It's a recent cast on and also uses some new yarn that I had just bought. So I bought some new yarn from Originally Lovely, which I have in this box here. I am an affiliate with Originally Lovely, but I bought this yarn all on my own. They send it in this really nice packaging, so I just wanted to keep it in the box to show you. So I ordered a bunch of fluff, which I have used before, and fluff is such a nice yarn. I was gonna say lovely yarn from Originally Lovely, but I mean, it is lovely, but it's such a nice yarn. This is a blown alpaca yarn that includes 70% baby alpaca, 7% merino, and 23% polyamide. And this is the color Wolf. This really nice brown. There definitely is a bit of heathering, and it really is as soft as it looks. I'm definitely into the super soft yarns lately, like the Fluff, the Surrey DK from Sorella, just lots of really fun yarns that are just a little bit different than standard wool yarns. And the pattern that I wanted to cast on was for the Adventures of Life make-along that's currently ongoing, and I decided to cast on the Sundown Shawl. So the Sundown Shawl is an oversized blanket scarf, and I've always really loved the idea of a big blanket scarf. I feel like rectangular blanket scarves are really fun to wear. They're like easy to style, whether you want to drape them kind of elegantly over your shoulders or wear them around your neck like an actual scarf, or even like wear it as like a blanket or something while you're working at your desk. I feel like there's so much versatility with it, but I've always been a little bit not excited to knit them. Like, I'm excited to use them, but the idea of knitting a giant rectangle always scares me. So I decided to take the plunge and do it this time. Now this is going to be a huge shawl. The Sundown Shawl comes in two sizes, a small and a large. I'm making the large size shawl, which has this amount of width, and then it's about 60 inches long, or 5 feet long. And the small version is about half the width. So it's more of a scarf. So maybe like this width, and then it's still the 60 inches long. So I really wanted the large size because I wanted the versatility of the big blanket shawl or blanket scarf style, but I knew that the full size was just going to be maybe too much knitting. So I was like, all right, maybe I can make it more palatable if I cut out a motif. So you can see the pattern motif here. It features a section of moss stitch, it features some ribbing, and then it features this mock cable. I don't know if you can tell, but this is actually mock cabling, so no cables, no cable needle. It's just a traveling stitch that sort of creates the illusion of a cable. So it's a lot faster to knit, and definitely I think has the same effect. And so that's about the motif, and so you can see it repeats a handful of times. So I thought I would make it a little bit more palatable to knit by not doing the amount of repeats that it called for in the pattern. I actually cut out one whole motif, so mine is a little bit narrower than the full large size. And the kit for the large size comes with 11 balls of yarn. I got 8, so a little bit less, and my plan is just to knit until I run out of yarn. So I don't actually know the finished dimensions of my shawl. I mean, I obviously can tell how wide it's going to be, and I did actually just join in a new ball. You can see right here is where I joined my new ball. So I could do some math knowing I have 8 balls and that my first ball got me this amount of length, so I could calculate out how big it'll actually be. The Fluff is an Aran weight yarn, and the pattern calls for 6mm needles. I chose to go up 0.5 millimeter, so these are 6.5mm needles, or US 10.5. It really is a nice yarn to work with. It definitely is as soft as it looks. It just feels so luxurious and just super soft and next to skin. It doesn't feel too delicate, I think, because of the needle size. You can see the fabric, you know, it's dense, but it still has some flow, and this kind of yarn is just super lightweight. So I think overall it's just going to create a really beautiful kind of blanket scarf to wear and to use. I chose the color Wolf because I was looking for something kind of neutral that I could throw on with a bunch of different outfits, although the Fluff yarn comes in like so many nice colors. Like, I was really close to getting the deep eggplant purple color because I love that color, but I just figured I might have a little bit more use with this more neutral brown, and I really like how it looks. This color definitely has less stitch definition than maybe some other colors in the palette, just because it does have that heathering that kind of blurs the stitches, whereas some of the other colors I don't think have as much heathering, so you might get a little bit more stitch definition if you choose a different color. But I think from afar you can definitely still see how the shawl is going to look. It definitely is like a nice reversible pattern because of the moss stitch. Obviously the panels with the traveling stitches are just purl panels on the back, but it doesn't look like this is the wrong side. I think with scarves, I feel like I have difficulty picking patterns I like because I want it to be reversible, because you never know how it's gonna fall, and I think this looks good on both sides. The pattern is both written out and charted, and it definitely was a really easy one to pick up. Like, it just took me 2 rows to establish the pattern, and now I don't need to refer to it at all. You can just read your stitches as you knit it. It has a kind of like, it's an easy repeat, so quickly memorizable. So this is definitely a project that is really easy for me to pick up at any time and to work on. And it's been really fun. I don't want this to languish. I can picture maybe the temptation to put this down and not pick it up again if I do get bored with it, since it is a lot of knitting. But I think motivating myself to get through 1 ball a week would put me on track to finish by Christmas. I do think that is ambitious, so I'm gonna give myself some flexibility if that doesn't exactly happen, but I don't want to have 2 months go by and I've only knit up 2 to 3 balls of my 8 balls. So would like to have this done before January. We'll see how it goes. I think I have surprised myself with how often I do want to pick this up and work on, so it's definitely enough going on where it's engaging and has not bored me yet, even though it is just a rectangle. So there's my new project, the Sundown Shawl, as part of Originally Lovely's Adventures of Life Make-Along. The Make-Along is hosted on Discord. Anyone's welcome to join at any time. There are kits available for this project, as well as just the pattern or just the yarn, linked in my description below. Those are all the projects I have to share today. I do have some new yarn to share, so now we'll get into acquisitions, and after acquisitions, I'll share some upcoming knitting plans. I have some new yarn that I ordered from Little Fiber Co. Look at that. So pretty. So Little Fiber Co. focuses on non-superwash fibers. They like to emphasize that it is possible to have really nice, really soft and smooth non-superwash fibers, and I agree. This is definitely really, really nice. This is their merino fingering base, and I got it in the color Sprinkled, which is this really fun kind of medium tone purple. It definitely has that variegation, and this is a 438 yard skein, 100 grams, and it is 20.5 microns and a 4-ply yarn. I was really excited to get something of this color purple because this is a color purple that I don't really think I would have gravitated towards for wearing for myself, because I know I like purple and I always just assumed that dark purples were like the colors for me. Since doing my color analysis, I learned that there's a lot of mid-tone colors that I feel like I've always ignored, because for me, I would either go like super dark and moody, or I would try to go pastel or like a light neutral. But my whole palette has a lot of midtones, and I've kind of learned from just seeing a lot of different dyers collections is that midtones aren't super popular, or at least maybe I'm missing them. But I was really excited to get this kind of mid-tone purple. You can see here, like, there are the dark purples. I would say the ones that I gravitated towards before my color analysis were like this purple here, or like this purple, or these. But like all of these here, I would have never thought to shop for myself. So I was really excited when Lauren posted that this color was going to be coming out for a pre-order. The color is Sprinkled. It's just a really nice purple that I'm excited to knit with, excited to wear. This is a fingering weight yarn, and I do not do a lot of fingering weight garments, but Claire Jackson's Market Henley pattern has really spoken to me. I really love it. Every time I see someone knitting it, it just looks so good. It is a fingering weight pattern, and I think it would look really nice in this purple color. Has all over waffle stitch, and I'm excited to cast it on at some point. I think I'm gonna wait a little while before I cast it on, but that's definitely in an upcoming knitting plan for me. I did receive a copy of Memory Lane from Unit Toronto. This is Claudia Quintanilla's latest book, which is a beautiful collection of knitting patterns that focus on embellishing your knits. So a lot of these patterns, they start with a basic sort of base knit piece, and then there's something fun added on top. For example, there could be embroidery, some really nice lace work, beading, appliques put on top. So this is a really beautiful book, and I am going to be having a dedicated book review video for Memory Lane on my channel, so keep an eye out for that, where I'm going to be going through all of the patterns in here, the specs of the patterns, sort of the summary of the book, and if I think this would be a good fit for you depending on your interests. Here's one example of an embellished knit, another one here with some beautiful embroidery, and I was sent a kit from this book. So there was one pattern in here called Tekla. Here it is. That was sent to me in a kit. Tekla is a set-in sleeve top-down sweater, and it's kind of hard to see in the picture here, but there is some lace embellishment on the sleeves where the whole body is stockinette. These two yarns, this is Drops Kid Silk, and this is Gepard Wild and Soft. So you have a fingering weight. This is a merino wool and Tussa silk blend, and then the Drops Kid Silk is mohair and silk. I don't know where the label went, but it makes a nice DK weight yarn combo. And I'm actually glad that I didn't cast on Tekla yet, because now that I've received the book, I was flipping through the patterns and they're all beautiful, but another one really caught my eye that also is in a DK weight yarn combo, like a fingering weight and a mohair. And it's this one here called Narciso. It's this beautiful cardigan that features this patterning, cable patterning or lace patterning down the front, has a little bit of a ruffle, it has a set-in sleeve style, and I mean it's also in this really nice powder blue color, which is very similar to this yarn combo, and I think I'm gonna cast on that one instead of the Tekla with this yarn. I just feel like I've been looking for more sort of fun cardigans to wear. I mean, this is an example of one, but I would love more, and I feel like this pattern Narciso would just be so fun to work up this winter. I feel like the pattern would also really shine with the glow of the mohair. So again, another knitting plan that I'm not really sure when I'm going to cast on, since I have a lot on the needles right now and I'm trying to wrap up some projects, but I feel like I'm more excited to knit that cardigan pattern instead of the Tekla sweater, because I have a lot of sweater plans, I have a lot of sweaters on the needles, got to get through some cardigans. So Memory Lane is now available. Thank you Unit Toronto for gifting me this book, and yeah, keep your eyes out for a video review from me on this book. And I have one other knitting plan to share. So Casey from Young Folk Knits is hosting a Softly knit along. Softly is Sari Nordland's book, and the knit along is basically just knitting a pattern from the book. So I thought it'd be a great reason to cast on something new. Since I cast off my Halloween socks, I was kind of itching for another sock pattern to cast on. So I'm going between the two fingering weight sock patterns that are in the Sari Nordland book. I have fingering weight sock yarn in stash, so it's not anything that I need to go out and buy new yarn for. So perfect opportunity to join the knit along. And the first sock pattern that's in this book is called Euterpe. Might be pronouncing it wrong, and it'll probably be easier if I just put a photo on the screen rather than showing you in the book. But the sock patterning features traveling twisted stitches. It looks like some mock cables, but the construction of the sock is actually toe up with a heel flap and gusset. So I've never actually done a toe up heel flap and gusset sock. The only other toe up sock that I've done is the Andrea Mowry Bear Paw socks, which I love that pattern. I've enjoyed knitting those socks, so I don't really have an opposition to toe-up socks. I just have only really knit cuff-down socks. So I'm intrigued by that one. I think it'll be nice because it doesn't look like there's any cabling, just sort of moving stitches like left and right crosses or something like that. And the construction would be something new to me, so that could be entertaining, but I'm kind of worried maybe it's too much going on and I don't really know what kind of headspace I'm at for a sock pattern right now, like if I want something simpler, although of course a Sari Nordland sock is never that simple. But the other sock pattern in the book, the other fingering weight sock pattern, is called Melpomene. Again, sorry with the pronunciations, but this here is a more classic construction. It's a cuff down and then it's a lace sock. So again, no cables, which is good. I feel like cabled socks always give me a bit of hesitation just because once you pull out the toothpick to do cables, it's a little bit too much work for me. So these socks I think would be more familiar in the construction. The lace patterning is also really beautiful, so I'm not really sure which one I'm going to cast on. I would say I would ask you guys what you would vote for, but I think by the time you guys get to see this video, I will have already chosen. I do plan on casting on with this sock yarn that I have in stash. This is from Mamanoki Yarns, and it's this beautiful green color called Fir Tree. This is their Sock Fine 4-ply yarn. This is from Germany. I did buy this on a trip to Germany, which was like really fun. So I'm excited to finally be able to use this yarn. It's a 75% wool, 25% polyamide 4-ply sock yarn. And I think this tonal green color will really show off either of those Sari Nordland sock patterns really well. I feel like a lot of times I knit socks for the yarn, so I tend to do more basic patterns that show off the yarn more, like a stockinette sock to show off a heavily speckled yarn, or even just a plain ribbed sock to show off some colorful variegated yarn. But I kind of want to pivot towards more solid color socks that have more patterning, like the Sari Nordland lace or cable and texture socks. So I think it'll be really fun to cast on a sock from the Softly book for the Softly Knit Along with Casey from Young Folk Knits. So that's also an upcoming project. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me today and listening to all my project updates. I'm looking forward to bringing you all new videos in the upcoming weeks. So if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, my handle is @ne_knits. I tend to post more frequent updates on projects and stories so you can really see what I'm working on in the moment. I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye.